The pen was still in her hand. That is the first thing I noticed when I walked into the hospital room. My grandmother lay barely conscious, oxygen tubing across her face, monitors humming in steady rhythm. And wrapped around her trembling fingers was a thick black pen that had no business being there. On the tray beside her bed sat a stack of papers. Real estate transfer documents. I recognized the address immediately. The Lakefront villa. Estimated value, $170,000. My stomach dropped. 3 of my relatives stood around her bed. My uncle near the window. My cousin by the stand. My aunt holding the clipboard as if this were a routine form. They all looked up at me at the same time. Too quickly. I asked what was going on. My aunt said it was just paperwork. Said Grandma wanted everything handled before she passed. Said it was peaceful planning. Peaceful. Grandma could barely lift her head. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard my voice. She tried to speak, but her words were faint, broken. Her hand twitched as if the pen were too heavy. The document on top was a property transfer deed. The grantee name was not mine. Not shared among grandchildren. It was solely my uncle's. My uncle who had been struggling financially for years. My uncle who suddenly became very attentive once doctors said she had weeks left. I stepped closer to the bed and asked Grandma directly if this was what she wanted. My aunt answered for her. Said Grandma already agreed. Already signed most of it. That word echoed in my head. Most? Meaning she had signed under pressure while heavily medicated. I looked at the signature line. The name was shaky. Incomplete. The first letter larger than usual. The rest uneven. That was not how she signed. I had seen her handwriting my entire life. My uncle stepped forward and said not to make a scene in a hospital. Make a scene. The phrase felt deliberate. Because scenes attract attention. And attention is dangerous when something wrong is happening. Grandma's eyes met mine again. There was something there. Not confusion. Not agreement. Fear. A slight movement of her fingers. Not toward the paper. Toward me. And in that moment I understood something chilling. This was not estate planning. This was a rush job. They wanted the villa transferred before she slipped further away. Before anyone questioned capacity. Before anyone interfered. My aunt lifted the pen back toward Grandma's hand and said gently that they just needed one more signature. One more. That was when I pulled out my phone. Because if they were so confident this was legal, they would not mind witnesses. And if it was not, then the next sound they heard would not be my voice. It would be sirens. My thumb hovered over the screen for half a second. Then I dialed 911. I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I calmly reported suspected elder abuse and possible coercion involving a property transfer inside a hospital room. The shift in the room was instant. My uncle stepped toward me, demanding to know what I was doing. My aunt's face lost all color. My cousin muttered something about me overreacting. Overreacting. That word again, used when someone wants silence more than truth. I stepped closer to the bed while still on the call. I told the dispatcher my grandmother was heavily medicated and possibly not competent to sign legal documents. I gave the hospital name and room number clearly. The nurse outside must have heard the tension because she appeared at the doorway. My aunt quickly tried to frame it differently. She told the nurse we were just finalizing paperwork that Grandma requested. The nurse looked at the documents, then at Grandma, then at me. Something in my expression must have told her enough. She stepped fully into the room and asked who authorized legal paperwork during active end-of-life care. No one answered directly. My uncle attempted control again. He said everything was voluntary and that I was causing unnecessary drama. But Grandma's breathing had changed. Faster. Uneven. The pen slipped from her hand. That small detail felt louder than any argument. Within minutes, hospital security arrived, followed by 2 police officers. Calm. Professional. Observant. The officers asked everyone to step back from the bed. They separated us. One officer asked me what I witnessed. I explained the rushed transfer. The uneven signature. The visible distress. Another officer asked my uncle when the documents were prepared. He said earlier that morning. Convenient timing. The officer then asked if an attorney was present. No. Notary? No. Capacity evaluation? Silence. The nurse confirmed Grandma had received strong pain medication less than an hour prior, which meant legally, her decision-making ability was questionable at best. The officer gently asked Grandma if she understood what she was signing. Her eyes fluttered open again. She whispered one word. No. It was faint, but it was clear. That single word cracked the entire room open. My aunt tried to say she was confused. The officer raised a hand. Confusion does not equal consent. The documents were collected as evidence. My uncle's expression shifted from irritation to calculation. This was no longer a private family moment. It was now documented. Official. And if they truly believed they had done nothing wrong, they would not look as cornered as they did. But something about my uncle's stare unsettled me. This was not over. Stopping the signature was only the first move. And I had a feeling they would not walk away from $170,000 quietly. The officers remained in the hallway longer than I expected. Statements were taken separately. Times were noted. Medication charts were reviewed. The unfinished deed was sealed inside an evidence envelope. My uncle kept repeating that this was a misunderstanding. That Grandma had always promised him the villa. That everyone in the family knew it. Everyone. Interesting choice of word. Because I did not know. And neither did my mother, who arrived 20 minutes later looking pale and shaken. When she saw the police outside the room, her face hardened. She walked straight to my uncle and asked what he thought he was doing. He did not answer directly. He pivoted. Said I was manipulating the situation. Said I wanted control over the estate. Said I panicked because I was afraid of losing my share. Share. That word hung in the air like bait. The truth was simple. I never cared about the villa. But I cared about how it was being taken. The officers eventually left after advising the hospital to document capacity concerns in her file. No arrests. No charges. Not yet. But the warning was clear. Any further attempts without proper legal supervision would trigger formal investigation. My relatives left the room one by one. Not apologizing. Not explaining. Just retreating. Before my uncle stepped out, he leaned close and said quietly that I had made a mistake. That family matters should stay inside the family. A threat wrapped in tradition. After they were gone, Grandma squeezed my hand. Her grip was weak but intentional. She whispered that she felt tired when they brought the papers. That they told her it was routine. That they said I agreed. I felt something cold settle in my chest. They used my name. That meant planning, not impulse. That night, I requested a copy of her most recent will from her attorney. I had never been curious before. Now I needed clarity. When the attorney called back, his tone changed after I explained what happened. He confirmed there had been no scheduled property transfer. No amendment requested. No discussion about giving the villa solely to my uncle. Which meant the documents were drafted independently. Possibly without legal review. The attorney asked a simple question. Who prepared those papers? I did not know. But I was about to find out. Because one thing became clear that day. They were not acting out of grief. They were racing a clock. And when people race against death for money, they rarely stop after one failed attempt. The villa was still in her name. For now. But the pressure had only begun. The next morning, I went straight to the county recorder's office. If someone was bold enough to bring a transfer deed into a hospital room, I needed to know how far they had already gone. Property records do not lie. At least not easily. The clerk pulled up the villa's file. Ownership still listed under my grandmother's name. No recent filings. No pending transfers. On the surface, everything looked clean. Too clean. I requested a copy of the blank deed template they had tried to use. The one sealed in the evidence bag. The format looked standard, but something about the notary section caught my attention. The notary stamp was printed, not embossed. And the commission number looked slightly blurred. I took a photo and stepped outside. Then I called the attorney again. He ran the notary commission through the state database. Invalid. Expired 2 years ago. Which meant one of two things. Either they were reckless, or they assumed no one would check. I drove straight to my uncle's office building. a small insurance brokerage he had been barely keeping afloat. The receptionist hesitated when I asked if a woman named Karen Doyle worked there. The name printed beneath the fake notary stamp. The receptionist said Karen left the company 3 years ago. My pulse quickened. 3 years. That matched the expiration date. Someone reused an old stamp. Someone who had access to old files. As I turned to leave, I noticed a familiar SUV pulling into the lot. My cousin stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. He froze when he saw me. Then he walked back to his car without entering the building. That was not coincidence. They were scrambling. Later that afternoon, my mother received a certified letter. A formal notice claiming Grandma had verbally gifted the villa months ago and that witnesses could testify to her intent. Witnesses. Conveniently all close to my uncle. It was a strategy shift. If they could not get the signature under medication, they would attempt to argue prior intent. But here is what they forgot. Grandma kept journals. Every week for the past decade, she wrote detailed notes about her finances, her garden, her thoughts about each of us. That night, I sat beside her bed and asked gently where she kept the blue leather notebook. Her eyes opened slowly. She whispered one word. Safe. At her house. In the hallway closet. Behind the winter coats. I drove there immediately. The house felt too quiet. As I entered, I noticed something disturbing. The hallway closet door was already open, and the shelf where the notebook should have been was empty. They had been there. Before me. And now the journals were gone. Which meant this was no longer just about a rushed hospital signature. This was a coordinated plan. Documents drafted. Notary falsified. Evidence removed. And the most chilling part. They were moving fast. Because they knew Grandma did not have much time left. And once she was gone, her voice would be replaced by paperwork. Unless I moved faster. The empty shelf in the hallway closet told me 2 things. First, they were desperate. Second, they were careless. Because Grandma had always been meticulous. Too meticulous to keep only one record of something important. I searched the rest of the house carefully. Drawers. Desk compartments. Filing cabinets. Nothing obvious. Whoever took the journals knew exactly where to look. But as I stood in her bedroom, I remembered something small she once said during tax season. Always keep copies somewhere no one expects. Not in the safe. Not in the desk. Somewhere boring. I walked into the kitchen. Past the spice rack. Past the cookie jars. Then I stopped in front of the old recipe box she never used anymore. Inside were index cards, handwritten recipes, faded and worn. And beneath them, a thin flash drive taped to the bottom of the box. My hands shook as I pulled it free. I drove straight to my house and plugged it into my laptop. Folders appeared instantly. Scanned copies of her journals. Organized by year. Timestamped. Backed up. Grandma had seen something coming. I opened the most recent folder. There it was. An entry from 2 months ago. She wrote about feeling pressured by my uncle to update her will. She wrote that she loved all her grandchildren equally. She wrote clearly that the villa was to be sold and the proceeds divided evenly. Evenly. Not gifted. Not promised. Divided. Another entry from 3 weeks ago mentioned my cousin asking unusual questions about deed transfers. She wrote that it made her uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. The word carried weight now. I saved multiple copies of the files. Uploaded them to secure cloud storage. Sent one encrypted copy to the attorney. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my uncle. He said he wanted to resolve things peacefully. Said legal conflict would drain the estate. Said Grandma would not want this tension. That line almost made me laugh. They forged paperwork. They tried to manipulate a dying woman. They removed her journals. And now they were concerned about peace. I replied with one sentence. I have copies of her writings. No emotion. No explanation. Just fact. His response took longer this time. When it came, it was shorter. We should talk. The shift was obvious. They believed destroying the journals would erase intent. But they forgot something critical. Grandma trusted technology more than they realized. And now I had proof not only of her wishes, but of their pressure campaign. Still, One problem remained. They had already shown they were willing to fabricate documents, which meant they might try something worse. Something final. Grandma was still in the hospital, still vulnerable. And if they felt cornered again, I had to consider the possibility that paperwork would not be their last move. 2 nights later, the hospital called again. Not about Grandma's condition, about visitors. The nurse on duty recognized tension from earlier in the week. She said my uncle and cousin arrived after visiting hours with a private notary. Private. After hours. My chest tightened. I drove through red lights. When I reached the floor, the hallway lights were dimmed for the night shift. But Grandma's room door was partially closed. Voices inside. Low. Urgent. I pushed the door open without knocking. There they were. My uncle at the bedside. My cousin near the window. And a woman in a gray blazer holding a leather portfolio. Notary stamp already visible on the clipboard. They froze when they saw me. The notary tried to stay composed. She said she was there to witness a voluntary signature. Voluntary. Grandma looked exhausted. Her oxygen levels flickered slightly lower than before. She barely seemed aware of the room. I stepped closer and asked the notary if she had verified capacity. She said she relied on the family's assurance and brief verbal confirmation. Assurance. That word almost burned. I asked Grandma if she understood what the papers were. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. My uncle jumped in quickly, saying she had agreed earlier and was just tired now. Tired. Yes. Dying people are tired. That does not mean they are consenting. I pulled out my phone again. But this time I did not dial immediately. I pressed record. And I asked clearly if anyone had consulted her attorney before bringing new documents. Silence. I asked the notary if she had seen the previous police report. Her expression changed. She had not. My cousin snapped and said I was harassing them. That I wanted control. That I was poisoning the family. Poisoning. Interesting choice of word. Because in that moment I noticed something else. Grandma's bag. It had been recently changed. A stronger pain management drip than earlier in the day. Convenient timing. I stepped into the hallway and demanded to speak with the charge nurse. Within minutes, hospital administration was involved again. This time firmer. They informed the notary that without documented physician confirmation of capacity, no legal documents could be executed. The notary packed up quickly. Too quickly. As she left, I caught the name on her badge. It was different from the printed commission number on the first forged deed, which meant they were cycling through notaries. Trying until one worked. My uncle's patience cracked. He said I was dragging this out for my own benefit. Said I wanted the villa. I looked him in the eye and told him something simple. If I wanted it, I would not be fighting for it to be divided. He had no answer. Security escorted them out. Again. But as I sat beside Grandma afterward, I realized something darker. They were escalating. They were willing to risk legal exposure. Which meant the money was not just important. It was urgent. And when money becomes urgent enough, desperation follows. Grandma squeezed my hand faintly. And I knew one thing for certain. This would not end quietly. The urgency started to make sense the next morning. My attorney called with new information. He had pulled public financial records tied to my uncle's business. Multiple liens had been filed over the past 6 months. One by the IRS. Another by a private lender. Amounts were not small. If the villa transferred solely into his name, it could be leveraged immediately. Sold fast. Or used as collateral to cover debt before creditors tighten further. This was not about sentimental inheritance. This was survival. And survival makes people reckless. I requested deeper financial discovery through proper channels. If he had financial incentive to pressure Grandma, that strengthened a potential elder exploitation claim. Meanwhile, Grandma's condition declined. Doctors moved her to hospice care inside the same hospital. More privacy. More quiet. More vulnerability. I installed a small camera inside her room with hospital approval. Not hidden. Fully disclosed to administration for safety documentation. If anyone stepped inside with paperwork again, it would be recorded. 2 days later, the trap revealed itself. My cousin entered alone during visiting hours. He sat beside her bed and spoke softly. Too softly for hallway monitors to pick up clearly. But the camera captured every movement. He placed a single sheet of paper on the tray table. No notary this time. No formal deed. Just a handwritten statement claiming she intended to gift the villa to his father. He guided her hand toward the page. She was barely conscious. Her fingers did not even grip the pen fully. He pressed her hand down. That image froze something inside me. It was not persuasion anymore. It was physical manipulation. Hospital staff intervened within minutes because I was watching remotely. I called the nurses' station immediately. When security arrived, my cousin tried to frame it as helping her write a note. But the footage told a different story. Clear pressure. Clear positioning of her hand. Clear attempt to manufacture consent. This time, the hospital filed its own internal report, which meant the matter escalated beyond family complaint. Adult Protective Services became involved automatically. And once APS enters a case, documentation becomes mandatory. My uncle called that evening furious. He said I was destroying his family. I told him something calm and precise. No one forced your hand onto a pen. He hung up. 2 days later, APS interviewed Grandma privately with medical staff present. She whispered something that sealed everything. She said she felt pushed. Not just physically. Emotionally. Repeatedly. Those interviews were recorded. And once an official finding of coercion is documented, consequences expand. I realized then that this was no longer about preventing a signature. It was about exposing a pattern. And patterns do not disappear quietly. They unravel. Especially when desperation leaves fingerprints everywhere. Grandma passed away 3 days later. Peacefully. Without signing anything. But the story did not end with her funeral. It began there. Adult Protective Services finalized their report within 2 weeks. The findings were clear. Repeated attempts to secure property transfer while the subject was medically compromised. Documented pressure. Attempted execution without verified capacity. The hospital filed its own incident documentation. And my attorney moved quickly. We petitioned the probate court to freeze any property transfer attempts pending investigation. We submitted the hospice footage, the police report from the first incident, the invalid notary record, the deleted cloud evidence, and Grandma's scanned journal entries. It was no longer accusation. It was a timeline. Coordinated. Calculated. The hearing was brief. The judge reviewed the APS findings first. That carried weight. Then the financial liens tied to my uncle's business. Then the forged notary stamp. Then the footage of my cousin guiding her hand. Each piece stacked on the last. By the time arguments began, the outcome felt inevitable. The court ruled the attempted transfers invalid and noted credible evidence of coercion. A formal warning was entered into the record regarding elder exploitation statutes. Then came the part my uncle did not expect. Because of the documented misconduct, the judge approved immediate sale of the villa under court supervision. Proceeds to be distributed evenly among all beneficiaries per the last verified will. Evenly. Exactly as Grandma wrote. But there was more. Due to the legal expenses triggered by the coercion attempts, my uncle's share was reduced proportionally to cover administrative and investigative costs. Not erased. Reduced. Publicly. Recorded. He walked out of that courthouse looking smaller than I had ever seen him. The man who tried to rush a dying woman into signing lost not only control of the property. He lost credibility. Creditors learned of the court findings. His business partnerships grew cautious. Trust does not rebuild easily after official documentation of manipulation. As for me, I did not celebrate. I visited the lake one last time before the villa sold. Stood on the dock where Grandma used to sit at sunset. She once told me something simple. Character shows when no one is watching. My uncle forgot that cameras exist. That journals exist. That hospitals document everything. And that desperation leaves trails. The villa sold within 60 days. The funds were divided exactly as she intended. No secret signatures. No rushed bedside deals. Just legal, clean transfer. They tried to force a dying woman's hand. Instead, They forced the truth into court. And the truth signed the final papers. If this story resonates you, subscribe to this channel and press the bell icon so you don't miss these interesting revenge stories. See you in the next one.